Chapter 9 The Half-Blood Prince. Şuna bir bakayım ve diyecek bir şeyim var mı düşünüyorum. Devam. Harry and Ron met Hermione in the common room before breakfast next morning. Hoping for some support for his theory, Harry lost no time in telling Hermione what he had overheard Malfoy saying on the Hogwarts Express. But he was obviously showing off for Parkinson, wasn't he? Interjected Ron quickly before Hermione could say anything. Well, she said uncertainly, I don't know. It will be like Malfoy to make himself seem more important than he is, but that's a big lie to tell. Exactly, said Harry, but he could not press the point because so many people were trying to listen into his conversation, not to mention staring at him and whispering behind their hands. It's rude to point, Ron snapped at a particularly minuscule first-year boy as they joined the queue to climb out of the portrait hall. The boy, who had been muttering something about Harry behind his hand to his friend, promptly turned scarlet and toppled out of the hall in alarm. Ron sniggered. I love being a sixth year, and we're going to be getting free time this year. Whole periods when we can just sit up here and relax. We're going to need that time for studying, Ron said Hermione as they set off down the corridor. Yeah, but not today, said Ron. Today is going to be a real dose, I reckon. Hold it, said Hermione, throwing out an arm and holding a passing fourth year, who was attempting to push past her with a lime green disc clutched tightly in his hand. Fanked frisbees are banned. Hand it over, she told him sternly. The scolding boy handed over the snarling frisbee, locked under her arm, and took off after his friends. Ron waited for him to vanish, then tucked the frisbee from Hermione's grip. Excellent, I always wanted one of these. Hermione's remonstration was drowned by a loud giggle. Lavender Brown had apparently found Ron's remark highly amusing. She continued to laugh as she passed them, glancing back at Ron over her shoulder. Ron looked rather pleased with himself. The ceiling of the great hall was creamily blue and streaked with frail, wispy clouds, just like the squares of sky visible through the high, mullioned windows. While they tucked into porridge and eggs and bacon, Harry and Ron told Hermione about their embarrassing conversation with Hagrid the previous evening. But he can't really think we'd continue care of magical creatures, she said, looking distressed. I mean, when has any of us expressed, any enthusiasm? That's it though, innit, said Ron, swallowing an entire fried egg whole. We were the ones who made the most effort in classes because we liked Hagrid, but he thinks he liked the stupid subject. Do you recall anyone going to go on to Newt? Neither Harry nor Hermione answered. There was no need. They knew perfectly well that nobody in their year would want to continue care of magical creatures. They avoided Hagrid's eye and returned his cheery wave only half-heartedly when he left the staff table 10 minutes later. After they had eaten, they remained in their places, awaiting Professor McGonagall's descent from the staff table. The distribution of class schedules was more complicated than usual this year, for Professor McGonagall needed first to confirm that everybody had achieved the necessary all grades to continue with their chosen Newts. Hermione was immediately cleared to continue with charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, herbology, arithmancy, ancient runes, and potions, and shot off to a first period ancient runes class without further ado. Neville took a little longer to sort out. His round face was anxious as Professor McGonagall looked down his application and then consulted his own results. Herbology, fine, she said. Professor Sprout will be delighted to see you back with an outstanding all. And you qualify for defense against the dark arts with exceeds expectations. But the problem is transfiguration. I'm sorry, Longbottom, but unacceptable really isn't good enough to continue to Newt level. I just don't think you'd be able to cope with the coursework. Neville hung his head. Professor McGonagall peered at him through her square spectacles. Why do you want to continue with Transfiguration anyway? I never had the impression that you particularly enjoyed it. Neville looked miserable and muttered something about my grandmother once. Snorted Professor McGonagall. It's high time your grandmother learned to be proud of the grandson she's got, rather than the one she thinks she ought to have, particularly after what happened at the ministry. McGonagall be. Canım benim be. Neville turned very pink and blinked confusedly. Professor McGonagall had never paid him a compliment before. I'm sorry, Longbottom, but I cannot let you into my new class. I see that you have and exceeds expectations in charms, however. Why not try for a nude in charms? My grandmother thinks charms is a soft option, mumbled Neville. Take charms, said Professor McGonagall, and I shall drop Augusta a line reminding her that just because she failed her charms all, the subject is not necessarily worthless. Smiling slightly at the look of delighted incredulity on Neville's face, Professor McGonagall tapped a blank schedule with the tip of her wand and handed it, now carrying the tales of his new classes, to Neville. Professor McGonagall turned next to Parvati, whose first question was whether Franz, the handsome centaur, was still teaching divination. He and Professor Trelawney are dividing classes between them this year, said Professor McGonagall, a hint of disapproval in her voice. It was common knowledge that she despised the subject of divination. The 6th year is being taken by Professor Trelawney. Parvati said, "Oh, for divination," 5 minutes later, looking slightly crestfallen. Crestfallen. Sevinmiş olması lazım ama kelimeden emin olamadım. Bakıyoruz. Crestfallen. Ne? Parvati said, "Oh, for divination," 5 minutes later, looking slightly crestfallen. The 6th year is being taken by Professor Trelawney. Hani sevmemeye başlamış lan büyük ihtimal şeyden sonra. Frenz'den sonra. Aa. So, Potter, said Professor McGonagall, consulting her nose as she turned to Harry. Charms, defense against the dark arts, herbology, transfiguration, all fine. I must say I was pleased with your transfiguration mark, Potter, very pleased. Now, why haven't you applied to continue with potions? I thought it was your ambition to become an order. It was, but you told me I had to get an outstanding in my all, Professor. And so you did when Professor Snape was teaching the subject. Professor Slughorn, however, is perfectly happy to accept new students with exceeds expectations at all. Do you wish to proceed with potions? Yes, said Harry, but I didn't buy the books or any ingredients or anything. I'm sure Professor Slughorn will be able to lend you some, said Professor McGonagall. Very well, Potter. Here is your schedule. Oh, by the way, 20 hopefuls have already put down their names for the Gryffindor Quidditch team. I shall pass the list to you in due course, and you can fix up trials at your leisure. A few minutes later, Ron was cleared to do the same subjects as Harry, and the two of them left the table together. O zaman bunların notları bayağı bir aynı. Sadece bunun outstanding'i yok. Öyle E falan almış birçoğundan. Good. Luke said Ron delightedly, gazing at his schedule. We've got a free period now, and a free period after break, and after lunch. Excellent. They returned to the common room. Çok güzel demedim mi? Excellent. Güzel dedim. They returned to the common room, which was empty apart from a half dozen 7th years, including Katie Bell, the only remaining member of the original Gryffindor Quidditch team that Harry had joined in his first year. I told you you'd get that. Well done, she called over, pointing at the captain's badge on Harry's chest. Tell me when you call trials. Don't be stupid, said Harry. You don't need to try out. I watched you play for 5 years. You mustn't start off like that, she said warningly. For all you know, there is someone much better than me out there. Good teams have been ruined before now because captains just kept playing the old faces or letting in their friends. Ron looked a little uncomfortable and began playing with the fanged frisbee Harmony had taken from the fourth-year student. It zoomed around the common room, snarling and attempting to take bites of the tapestry. Attempting to take bites of the tapestry. Off, değil, off, kısa off. Crookshanks's yellow eyes followed it, and he hissed when it came too close. An hour later, they reluctantly left the sunlit common room for the defense against the dark arts classroom 4 floors below. Harmony was already queuing outside, carrying an armful of heavy books and looking put upon. We got so much homework for runes, she said anxiously when Harry and Ron joined her. A 15-inch essay, 2 translations, and I've got to read these by Wednesday. Shame, yawned Ron. You wait, she said resentfully. I bet Snape gives us lots. The classroom door opened as she spoke, and Snape stepped into the corridor, his sallow face framed as ever by 2 curtains of greasy black hair. Silence fell over the queue immediately. Inside, he said. Harry looked around as they entered. Şey diyeceğim, bu en iyi karanlık sanatlara karşı savunma hocaları konuşmaları yapıp durduk. Lupin çok iyi dedik ama Moody dedik, bir tık çakma Moody. Daha iyi dedik çünkü dedik, ne dedik? Moody dedik, çakma Moody dedik. Bunları direkt affedilmez lanet uyguluyor bunların üstünde falan. Bayağı böyle işlevsel oluyor falan dedik. Halbuki Lupin ne kadar iyi bir hoca olsa bile Grindelwald'larla Cercut falan. O ne lan? Kelebek herhalde. Hiçbir sivrisinek bu kadar hızlı uçamaz. Aynen. Jesus fucking ya. Onlar sivrisinek mi lan yoksa? Neyse öte taraftan Lupin işte Grindelwald'larla falan uğraşıyor. Tamam güzel, hoş ama şey değil dedik. İşte karanlık sanatlara karşı savunma değil. Gerçekten Voldemort'la şey dersek onu nasıl yeneceğimizin şeyi değil dedik. Ama dedik, ne dedik orada bir şey dedik. Bunlar 3. sınıfken daha çok erkendi falan. Öyle bir şeylerin gösterilmemesi tercih edilmiş de olabilir dedik. Hiç Snape'i konuşmadık. Snape benim bildiğim iyi hoca. O da böyle mesela en başta şey diyecek. Kitapları kaldırın diyecek falan böyle direkt. Gerçi zaten direkt hevesi falan var. Snape iyi hoca. Sanki hatta böyle bir şey olursa çok hoşuma gidecek. Harry böyle bir tık da olsa şey olacak. Snape böyle iyi şeydi falan. Hani Harry kendini kabul etmekte zorluk çekti ama Snape'in dersleri sarıyordu falan. Böyle bir şey görürsem bayağı mutlu olacağım. Tamam. Videoyu tekrar başlatmam. Benim çok motherfucker oluyorum lan bazen. Hani böyle kitap okumaya devam ediyoruz. Susmak için kaydı durdurmam gerekiyormuş gibi hissediyorum. Söyleyeceklerim bir de şimdi kitaba devam ediyoruz diyeceğim. Sanki kaydı durdurmuşum da şimdi devam ediyormuşuz gibi olacak falan. Bunlar hep kanıt. İşimi sevdiğimi, severek yaptığımın kanıtı bunlar. Bunları alın, değerini bilin, değerini bilin. Okay. Inside, he said. He looked around as they entered. Bak. Bir şeyler uçuyor odanın içinde de. Snape had imposed his personality upon the room already. It was gloomier than usual, as curtains had been drawn over the windows, and was lit by candlelight. New pictures adorned the walls, many of them showing people who appeared to be in pain, sporting grisly injuries or strangely contorted body parts. Nobody spoke as they settled down, looking around at the shadowy, gruesome pictures. I have not asked you to take out your books, said Snape, closing the door and moving to face the class from behind his desk. Hermione hastily dropped her copy of Confronting the Faceless back into her bag and stowed it under her chair. I wish to speak to you, and I want your fullest attention. His black eyes rolled over their upturned faces, lingering for a fraction of a second longer on Harry's than anyone else's. You have had 5 teachers in this subject so far, I believe. You believe like you haven't watched them all come and go, Snape, hoping you'd be next, told Harry scathingly. Kesinlikle. Naturally, these teachers will all have had their own methods and priorities. Given this confusion, I am surprised so many of you scraped and all in this subject. I shall be even more surprised if all of you manage to keep up with the new work, which will be much more advanced. Snape set off around the edge of the room, speaking now in a lower voice. The class craned their necks to keep him in view. The dark arts, said Snape, are many, varied, ever-changing, and eternal. Fighting them is like fighting a many-headed monster, which each time a neck is severed, sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. You're fighting that which is unfixed, mutating, indestructible. Bir şekilde Voldemort hakkında konuşuyor gibi değil mi? Ve harika bir paragraf. Hiç böyle olduğunu hatırlamıyordum. Bir daha okuyacağız. The dark arts, said Snape, are many, varied, çeşit çeşit, ever-changing, and eternal. Fighting them is like fighting a many-headed monster, which, each time a neck is severed, sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. You're fighting that which is unfixed, mutating, indestructible. Point 1. Voldemort alt edildikten sonra ileride bir gün başka böyle bir Voldemort var bir şey gelecek. O bizim Voldemort'tan bile şey olacak. Buna geliyor öyle hani bir şekilde. Yani bir şekilde böyle bir Hydra gibi bir şey düşünün. Bir sürü kafası var falan. Her kafası bir karanlık büyücüyse o en fierce'dır şu ana kadar olanı Voldemort. Mu? Salazar Slytherin'den daha iyi mi mesela? Neyse. Önce bunu bir düşünelim ya. Önce bunu bir düşüneyim. Cevabım yok. Daha mı şey, çok şartları çok farklı. Salazar Slytherin hakkında çok az şey biliyoruz falan. Belki Potter'ım orada falan yazıyordursa da onları da ben okumadım falan. Bunu bilemiyoruz. Ne diyeceğimi de birazcık unuttum ve birazcık hevesim kaçtı biliyorsunuz mu? Onun için şöyle en azından en başta dediğim şeyi diyeyim. Lafın devam edesi varsa devam ederiz. Etmeyesi yoksa kitap okumaya devam ederiz. Her kafa işte en böyle fiercer kafa Voldemort dedik. O kesilecek, Harry kesecek onu. Ondan sonra yeni bir şey çıkacak orada anlatabiliyor muyum? İşin bu taraftan bir şey de var bence. Böyle bir okuması da var yani. Sadece karanlık sanatlar olarak değil, aynı zamanda karanlık lordlar olarak falan. Aynen. Şimdi bir kere daha düşünüyorum. Aklıma şöyle bir şey geldi. Bir kere daha okudum şu kısmı. Hani böyle dark arts, böyle her türlü daha böyle indestructible bir şeye gidiyor ya. Böyle daha fazla evriliyor, daha fazla böyle şey oluyor. Daha az tahmin edilebilir oluyor falan. Unfixed. Öyle anladım ben. Öyle zaten. Hani gün sonunda bunun Dark Arts'tan çıkıp Light Arts gibi bir şey dönüşmeyeceğini nereden biliyoruz mesela? Dark, Light mı dedim ben? Light and Dark falan yani. Light Arts. Bir şekilde bu Dark Arts nasıl böyle şey dönüşmüyor falan. Hani bir şekilde en dark olan art hani bir şekilde aslında şey değil mi? Din oldum işte. Şu an yine dinden konuşuyor. Hani böyle din diyor ki her şeyin zıttı yani tamam mı? O zaman light arts yani bu dark arts'ın en de sonunda evrileceği yer. Hani bir şekilde karşıdaki insana zarar verme oluyor. Öyle bir seviyeye gelecek ki karşıdaki insan için ona zarar veriyorum gibi bir şey olacak. Kendi iyiliğin için değil falan. Yani. Light arts gibi bir şey yani böyle. Biraz daha düşünüyorum. Devam then. Harry stared at Snape. It was surely one thing to respect the dark arts as a dangerous enemy, another to speak of them, as Snape was doing, with a loving caress in his voice. Your defenses, said Snape a little louder, must therefore be as flexible and inventive as the arts you seek to undo. These pictures indicate a few of them is its past. Give a fair representation of what happens to those who suffer, for instance, the Cruciatus curse. He waved a hand toward a witch who was clearly shrieking in agony. Feel the Dementor's kiss, a wizard lying huddled and blank-eyed, slanted against a wall, or provoke the aggression of the Inferius, a bloody mess upon the ground. Has an Inferius been seen then? Said Parvati Patil in a high-pitched voice. Is it definite? Is he using them? The Dark Lord has used Inferi in the past, said Snape, which means you would be well advised to assume he might use them again. Now, he set off again around the other side of the classroom toward his desk, and again they watched him as he walked, his dark robes billowing behind him. You are, I believe, complete novices in the use of nonverbal spells. What is the advantage of a nonverbal spell? Hermione's hand shot into the air. Snape took his time looking around at everybody else, making sure he had no choice before saying curtly, "Very well, Miss Granger. Your adversary has no warning about what kind of magic you're about to perform," said Hermione, which gives you a split-second advantage. Güzel dedin. Ama aynı. De kopya cevabı oldu belliydi. Adversary falan. Not cool. Olsun. An answer copied almost word for word from the standard book of spells, grade 6, said Snape dismissively over in the corner. Malfoy sniggered, but correct in essentials. Yes, those who progress to using magic without shooting incantations gain an element of surprise in their spell casting. Not all wizards can do this, of course. It's a question of concentration and mind power, which some. His gaze lingered maliciously upon Harry once more. Black. Harry knew Snape was thinking of the disastrous Okulumuzun lessons of the previous year. He refused to drop his gaze, but glowered at Snape until Snape looked away. We will now divide, Snape went on, into pairs. One partner will attempt to jinx the other without speaking. The other will attempt to repel the jinx in equal silence. Carry on. Although Snape did not know it, he had taught at least half the class, everyone who had been a member of the DA. Although Snape did not know it. Cidden bilmedim o zaman. Cidden bilmiyorum yani. Yani biliyor olsaydı surprisingly oğullarınızdan iyi alabildiğiniz falan gibi bir laf etmezdi bence. Of the perform a shield charm the previous year, none of them had ever cast a charm without speaking, however. A reasonable amount of cheating ensued. Many people were merely whispering the incantation instead of saying it aloud. Typically, 10 minutes into the lesson, Hermione managed to repel Neville's muttered jelly legs jinx without uttering a single word. A feat that would surely have earned her 20 points for Gryffindor from any reasonable teacher, thought Harry bitterly, but which Snape ignored. He sweat between them as they practiced, looking just as much like an overgrown bat as ever, lingering to watch Harry and Ron struggling with the task. Ron, who was supposed to be jinxing Harry, was purple in the face, his lips tightly compressed to save himself from the temptation of muttering the incantation. Harry had his wand raised, waiting on tenterhooks to repel a jinx that seemed unlikely ever to come. Pathetic, Weasley said Snape after a while. Here, let me show you. He turned his wand on Harry so fast that Harry reacted instinctively. All thought of non-verbal spells forgotten, he yelled, "Protego!" His shield charm was so strong. Burası aşırı hoşuma gidiyor. Snape was knocked off balance and hit a desk. The whole class had looked around and now watched as Snape righted himself, scolding. Burası çok hoşuma gidiyor. Do you remember me telling you we are practicing non-verbal spells, Potter? Yes, said Harry stiffly. Yes, sir. Tam olarak burası. There is no need to call me sir, professor. The words had escaped him before he knew what he was saying. Ama çok iyi değil mi lan? Do you remember me telling you we are practicing non-verbal spells, Potter? Yes, said Harry stiffly. Yes, sir. There is no need to call me sir, professor. Professor. Bu da aslında buradaki sir'den geliyor. Profes. Şu an bir şey keşfetmiş olabiliriz. Profes. İtiraf etmek, öğretmek, itiraf etmek, açıkça iddia etmek, yapmak, icra etmek, profesörlük yapmak. Ya, açıkça söyleyici, profesör. O zaman aslında bu sir, yapıcı, ne bileyim, seaver'dır, sir. Silah, dur, Bul. Düşünüyorum, öyleyse varım. Neyse sonu Neyse sonu sir'le biten bir şey aklıma gelmedi. Böyle bir şey yapıcı gibi bir anlama gelen. Ama hepsi er'le bitiyor, anlatabiliyor muyum? Hani bir şekilde orada profesör, hani böyle profes yapıcı, yani itiraf edici falan. Bu nokta bir. Tamam, bunda zaten bir sorunumuz yok. Ben bu sör'ün de bir şekilde profesör, buradaki bu sör'den geldiğini düşünüyorum şu an. Bir de bir sör yazalım. Bakalım ona ne geliyor. Sör. Sir diye hitap etmek. In biblical references, siraj değil. Used as a polite or respectful way of addressing a man, especially one in a position of authority. Düşünüyorum. Neyse, bu teorim şu an tutacakmış gibi değil pek. Onun için şimdilik devam ediyorum. Bir kere daha yeri gelirse konuşuruz diyorum. The verse had escaped him before he knew what he was saying. There's no need to call me sir, Professor. Aşırı iyi. Several people gasped, including Hermione. Behind Snape, however, Ron, Dean, and Seamus grinned appreciatively. "Detention Saturday night at my office," said Snape. "I do not take cheek from anyone, Potter, not even the chosen one." "That was brilliant," Harry chortled Ron, once they were safely on their way to break a short while later. "You really shouldn't have said it," said Hermione, frowning at Ron. "What made you?" "He tried to jinx me in case you didn't notice," fumed Harry. "I had enough of that during those Okulumuzun lessons. Why doesn't he use another genius pick for a change? Was Dumbledore playing it anyway, letting him teach defense? Did you hear him talking about the dark arts? He loves them, all that unfixed, indestructible stuff." "Well," said Hermione, "I thought he sounded a bit like you." "Like me?" Hani cidden like me, cidden ben de öyle oldum, like me falan. "Yes, when you were telling us what it's like to face Voldemort. You said it wasn't just memorizing a bunch of spells. You said it was just you and your brains and your guts. Well, wasn't that what Snape was saying? That it really comes down to being brave and quick thinking?" Düşünce vakti. Aynen öyle ha. Hermione bayağı doğru diyor şu an. Neden? Çünkü bir şekilde Voldemort o kadar yenmesi imkansız birisi ki böyle. Ona dövüşmek demek tam olarak böyle o esnada ne yapacağını biliyor olmak demek ya böyle falan. O esnada ne yapacağını biliyor olmak demek, o Harry'nin Avatar State'de olduğu zamanlar yaptığı şeyler demek ya, hani dördüncü kitapta yaptığı gibi. Ne kadar efsane bir yermiş lan oralar bak. Altıncı kitaba geldik. Beşinci kitap geçti. Voldemort'la Dumbledore'un vs'si eyvallah güzeldi falan da o dördüncü kitaptaki o Voldemort vs. Harry'nin onun ayrı bir şeyi vardı ya. Onun ayrı bir yeri vardı yani. Neyse. Yani aslında tam olarak cidden şey diyor yani. Harry'nin tam olarak anlattığı şeyi diyor. Hani bir şekilde Voldemort'la dövüşürken, o alt edilemez de dövüşürken, hatta öldürülemez literally. Tam böyle refleksif olarak bir şeyler yapıyorsun ama. Kaçıyorsun falan böyle. Expelliarmus yapmayı deniyorsun falan. Hani böyle Quidditch reflekslerini falan kullanıyorsun. Birden böyle bir priori incantatem oluyor, asalar bağlanıyor falan. Böyle orada ittirmeye devam ediyorsun falan. Sonra oradan böyle senin sevdiğin, sevmediğin, cart bir sürü ölü olduğunu sonradan anladığın ya da o an anladığın insanlar geliyor. İşte Portkey'e git dokun, işte başka birisi geliyor benim vücudumda götür cart falan yapıyor. Onları falan da onaylıyorsun falan böyle. Hani çok şey böyle. O kadar an be an farklı farklı şeyleri çıkabilme potansiyeli var ki böyle ortaya falan. Very good. I'm impressed at the moment yani şu an. Düşünce vakti. Devam. He was so disarmed that she had taught his verse as well, worth memorizing as the standard book of spells that he did not argue. He was so disarmed that she had taught his verse. He was so disarmed that she had taught his verse as well, worth memorizing as the standard book of spells that he did not argue. Kendi laflarını da ezberlediğine aşırı şaşırıyor. Böyle %98,9 olsun, bir daha diyeceğim. He was so disarmed that she had taught his verse as well, worth memorizing as the standard book of spells that he did not argue. "Harry, hey, Harry." He looked around. Jack Sloper, one of the beaters on last year's Gryffindor Quidditch team, was hurrying toward him, holding a roll of parchment. Jack Sloper'da tam böyle bir şey olayı yok mu sizce de? James Potter şeyi havası falan. Tam öyle değil ama ondaki o böyle bir şeylik böyle. Ne derler ona? Haytalık mı denir? Böyle bir sorun çıkarmaya, şey etmeye hazır böyle. Tam şey ya, palyaço işte falan. Böyle birkaç kişi geliyor aklıma benim tanıdığım. Acaba birine örnek verebilir miyim buna? Düşünce vakti of course. Peeves'in daha hafif hali ve onun insan olan hali. Böyle bir şey var. Ama bayağı bir hafif hani Peeves'e kıyasla ama sonuçta Peeves'e kıyasladığım için aslında nasıl bir tarz bir insan olduğunu da anlıyorsunuz. Aynen. Ve onun insan hali of course. Devam. For you, Panted Sloper, listen, I heard you're the new captain when you're holding trials. I'm not sure yet, said Harry, thinking privately that Sloper will be very lucky to get back on the team. I'll let you know. Oh, right. I was hoping it would be this weekend, but he was not listening. He had just recognized the teen slanting writing on the parchment, leaving Sloper in mid-sentence. He hurried away with Ron and Hermione, unrolling the parchment as he went. Dear Harry, I would like to start our private lessons this Saturday. Kindly come along to my office at 8 p.m. I hope you are enjoying your first day back at school. Yours sincerely, Albus Dumbledore. P.S. I enjoy acid pops. He enjoys acid pops, said Ron, who had read the message over Harry's shoulder and was looking perplexed. It's the passport to get past the gargoyle outside his study, said Harry in a low voice. Ha, Snape's, ha, ha. Snape's not going to be pleased. I won't be able to do his detention. He, Ron and Hermione spent the whole of break speculating on what Dumbledore would teach Harry. Ron thought it most likely to be spectacular jinxes and hexes of the type the Death Eaters will not know. Hermione said such things were illegal and thought it much more likely that Dumbledore wanted to teach Harry advanced defensive magic. After break, she went off to arithmancy while Harry and Ron returned to the common room, where they grudgingly started Snape's homework. This turned out to be so complex that they still had not finished when Hermione joined them for their after-lunch free period. This turned out to be so complex that they still had not finished when Hermione joined them for their after-lunch free period. Though she considerably speeded up the process. They had only just finished when the bell rang for the afternoon's double potions and they beat the familiar path down to the dungeon classroom that had for so long been Snape's. When they arrived in the corridor, they saw that there were only a dozen people progressing to new levels. Crabbe and Goyle had evidently failed to achieve the required all grade, but 4 Slytherins had made it through, including Malfoy. 4 Ravenclaws were there, and 1 Hufflepuff, Ernie Macmillan, whom Harry liked despite his rather pompous manner. Ben de seviyorum böyle tipleri. Harry Ernie said portentously, holding out his hand as he reproached. Didn't get a chance to speak in defense against the dark arts this morning. Good lesson, I thought, but shield charms are old hat, of course, for us old DA legs. And how are you, Ron, Hermione? Ben şeyi anlamadım. Bu okulda 800 kişi falan yok mu? Böyle sınıf başına 200'den şey başına kısım, house başına 200'den sınıf başına 30 ve sınıfta kaç kişi var şu an? Only dozen people var, tamam mı? Totalde 120'den sadece 12 tanesi mi var? Sadece 12 kişi mi şeyi geçebilmiş falan? J.K. Rowling. Why? Why in the seven fucking hell böyle bir hata yapıyorsun? İşte bu George R. R. Martin tam olarak yapmayacağı olay yani. Tam olarak düşmeyeceği hata falan. 800 diyorum, yanlış mı hatırlıyorum bana, ama 800 vardı yani. 800 kişi falan. Sınıf odasında böyle bir laf olduğunu hatırlıyorum. Ve 12 kişi geçti. Ha, sadece yaklaşık 120 kişiden. Are you kidding me? Devam. Before they could say more than fine, the dungeon door opened and Slughorn's belly preceded him out of the door. As they filed into the room, his great walrus mustache curled above his beaming mouth, and he greeted Harry and Zabini with particular enthusiasm. The dungeon was most unusually already full of vapors and odd smells. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sniffed interestedly as they passed large, bubbling cauldrons. The four Slytherins took a table together, as did the four Ravenclaws. This left Harry, Ron, and Hermione to share a table with Ernie. They chose the one nearest a gold-colored cauldron that was emitting one of the most seductive scents Harry had ever inhaled. Somehow it reminded him simultaneously of treacle tart, the woody smell of a broomstick handle, and something flowery he thought he might have smelled at the barrel. Acaba. He found that he was breathing very slowly and deeply, and that the potion's fumes seemed to be filling him up like drink. A great container stole over him. He grinned across at Ron, who grinned back lazily. Now then, said Slughorn. Bu da benim gibi 3 kere diyor bir şeyleri. Whose massive outline was quivering through the many shimmering vapors. Scales out, everyone, and potion kiss, and don't forget your copies of advanced potion making. Sir, said Harry, raising his hand. Harry, my boy, I haven't got a book or scales or anything, nor Ron. We didn't realize we'd be able to do the nude, you see. Ah, yes, Professor McGonagall did mention. Not to worry, my dear boy, not to worry at all. You can use ingredients from the store cupboard today, and I'm sure we can lend you some scales. And we've got a small stock of old books here. They'll do until you can write to Floridian lots. Slughorn strolled over to a corner cupboard and, after a moment's foraging, emerged with 2 very buttered-looking copies of advanced potion making by Libatius Garage, which he gave to Harry and Ron along with 2 sets of tarnished scales. Now then, said Slughorn, returning to the front of the class and inflating his already bulging chest so that the buttons on his waistcoat threatened to burst off. I prepared a few potions for you to have a look at, just out of interest, you know. These are the kind of thing you ought to be able to make after completing your nudes. You ought to have heard of them, even if you haven't made them yet. Anyone tell me what this one is? Böyle bir şey konuşuyor yine. Neydi onun adı? Şiveli konuşuyor. Bu bir, ikincisi filminde tam şu kısımda şey vardı. Harry ile Ron'un kitapları aldığı yerde böyle bir tanesi güzel görünen, bir tanesi çok kötü görünen 2 kitap vardı. Harry ile Ron atlıyordu böyle falan. Ron böyle Harry'yi fırlatıyordu. Kendisi yeni olanı alıyordu, böyle dönüyordu geri. Harry de böyle üzgün, kötü olanı alıyordu falan. Çok iyiydi bence. Baya güzel bir değişiklik. He indicated the cauldron nearest the Slytherin table. Harry raised himself slightly in his seat and saw what looked like plain water boiling away inside it. Hermione's well-practiced hand hit the air before anybody else's. Slughorn pointed at her. It's Veritasero, a colorless, odorless potion that forces the drinker to tell the truth, said Hermione. Very good, said Slughorn happily. Now, he continued, pointing at the cauldron nearest the Ravenclaw table. This one here is pretty well known, featured in a few ministry leaflets lately too. Who can? Hermione's hand was fastest once more. It's Polyjuice potion, sir, she said. Harry too had recognized the slow, bubbling, mud-like substance in the second cauldron, but did not resent Hermione getting the credit for answering the question. She, after all, was the one who had succeeded in making it back in their second year. Excellent. Now, this one here. Yes, my dear, said Slughorn, now looking slightly bemused as Hermione's hand punched the air again. Is Amortentia. Sivriler. It is indeed. It seems almost foolish to ask, said Slughorn, who was looking mildly impressed. But I assume you know what it does. It's the most powerful law potion in the world, said Hermione. Quite right. You recognize it, I suppose, by its distinctive mother of pearl sheen. And the steam rising in characteristic spirals, said Hermione enthusiastically, and it's supposed to smell differently to each of us according to what attracts us. And I can smell fresh lemongrass and new parchment and... But she turned slightly pink and did not complete the sentence. May I ask your name, my dear, said Slughorn, ignoring Hermione's embarrassment. Hermione Granger, sir. Granger? Granger? Can you possibly be related to Hector Dagworth Granger, who founded the most extraordinary society of potioneers? No, I don't think so, sir. I am Muggle-born, you see. Harry saw Malfoy lean close to know them, whisper something. Both of them sniggered. Sniggered'ın ne demek olduğunu bilmiyorum ben. Güldüler mi, bir şey mi ettiler, güldüler herhalde. But Slughorn showed no dismay. On the contrary, böyle kötü surat yapmışlar. Çünkü but Slughorn showed no dismay diyor. Böyle kötü bir şey göstermedi diyor. On the contrary, he beamed and looked from Hermione to Harry, who was sitting next to her. Oh, one of my best friends is Muggle-born, and she is the best in our year. I'm assuming this is the very friend of whom you spoke, Harry? Yes, sir, said Harry. Well, take 20 well-earned points for Gryffindor, Miss Granger, said Slughorn genially. Malfoy looked rather as he had done the time Hermione had punched him in the face. Hermione turned to Harry with a radiant expression and whispered, "Did you really tell him I'm the best in the year? Oh, Harry." Well, what's so impressive about that? Whispered Ron, who for some reason looked annoyed. You are the best in the year. I'd have told him so if he'd asked me. Hermione smiled but made a gesture so that they could hear what Slughorn was saying. Ron looked slightly disgruntled. Amortentia doesn't really create love, of course. It is impossible to manufacture or imitate love. No, this will simply cause a powerful infatuation or obsession. This is probably the most dangerous and powerful portion in this room. Oh yes, he said, nodding gravely at Malfoy and Nod, both of whom were smirking skeptically. When you have seen as much of life as I have, you will not underestimate the power of obsessive love. Durdurmama gerek var mı? Yok. Bir konu hakkında konuşacaktım şu. Bir teori var. Teori diyor ki Voldemort'un babası üstünde kullandığı aşk iksirini Slughorn yapıyor. Bir şekilde ne oluyor? Voldemort'un annesinin doğum tarihini öğreniyor. Bir şekilde ne oluyor? Slughorn'un doğum tarihini hesaplıyor. Bir şekilde bakıyor ki ikisi de aynı anda Hogwarts'ta oldular. Birisi 5. 6. sınıfken birisi 1. 2. sınıftaydı belki falan. Slughorn yaptı diyor. When you have seen as much of life as I have, you will not underestimate the power of obsessive love. Voldemort bu gücün içinden doğdu çünkü falan. That's a good point. Düşünce zamanı diyoruz. Devam. And now, said Slughorn, it is time for us to start work. Sir, you haven't told us what's in this one, said Ernie Macmillan, pointing at a small black cauldron standing on Slughorn's desk. The potion within was splashing about merrily. It was the color of molten gold, and large drops were leaping like goldfish above the surface, though not a particle had spilled. Oh, said Slughorn again. He was sure that Slughorn had not forgotten the potion at all, but had waited to be asked for dramatic effect. Yes, that. Well, that one, ladies and gentlemen, is our most curious little potion called Felix Felicis. I take it he turned smiling to look at Hermione, who had let out an audible gasp. Did you know what Felix Felicis does, Miss Granger? It's liquid luck, said Hermione excitedly. It makes you lucky. The whole class seemed to sit up a little straighter. Now all Harry could see of Malfoy was the back of his sleek blonde head, because he was at last giving Slughorn his full and undivided attention. Quite right. Take another 10 points for Gryffindor. Yes, it's a funny little potion, Felix Felicis, said Slughorn. That's pretty tricky to make and disastrous to get wrong. However, if read correctly, as this has been, you will find that all your endeavors tend to succeed, at least until the effects wear off. Yine güzel bir nokta konuşacağız. Yine bir Süper Kalem Brothers videosunda diyor ki aslında Felix Felicis diye bir iksiri yok. Nedensine paso bunu kullanmadı hayatı o kadar kötüyken, üzgünken, cırt falan. Ne diye Slughorn hayatında sadece 2 kere kullandı bir daha kullanmadı falan. Bir şekilde diyorlar ki böyle iksir biliminde cırt yeterince iyi olan insanlar fark ediyor ki aslında Felix Felicis diye bir şey yok. İnsanlar şanslı olduklarını düşündükleri için şey oluyor diyorlar. Şanslı oluyorlar aslında falan diyorlar. Hatta zaten Felix Felicis diye de bir bölüm adı var ama o bölümde Felix Felicis'in kullanılmadığını tam aksine kullanılıyormuş gibi gösterildiğini ve kullandığını düşünen bir insanın yaşadığı şeyleri göreceğiz falan. It's good to know. Diyecek bir şey daha var mı? O kısmında işte yazarın bıraktığı bir ayrıntı olduğunu düşünüyorlar. Teoriyi yapan böyle Süper Kalem Brothers şey diyorlar. Yazar da hani yazarın bize aslında Felix'iz hakkında gerçeği anlatış tarzı diyorlar. Güzel bir videoydu. Benim şu an anlattığımdan kesinlikle kat ve kat daha ikna edici ve daha eğlenceli bir şekilde hazırlanmış bir video. Onu izleyin. Buraya kadar geldiyseniz bence artık Süper Kalem Brothers videoları izlenebilir gayet. Tamam altyazıları da oluyor onların. Böyle arada bozuluyor falan o şey otomatik altyazı zaten. Ama yine gayet güzel iş görüyor hani falan. İzleyin. Benim dediğim her Süper Kalem Brothers videosunda her böyle anımsadığım en azından bunlara bakın. Neye bakacağınızı da bilmiyorsunuz falan. Good job. Okay. Devam. Why don't people drink it all the time? Sir said Terrywood eagerly. Because if taken in excess, it causes giddiness, recklessness, and dangerous overconfidence, said Slughorn. Too much of a good thing, you know. Highly toxic in large quantities, but taken sparingly and very occasionally. Have you ever taken it, sir? Asked Michael Corner with great interest. Twice in my life, said Slughorn. Once when I was 24, once when I was 57. 2 tablespoonfuls taken with breakfast. Two tablespoonfuls taken with breakfast. 2 perfect days. He gazed dreamily into the distance. Whether he was play acting or not, though Harry, the effect was good. Thought Harry. Ben diyorum though Harry ne demek orada? Whether he was play acting or not, thought Harry, the effect was good. And that, said Slughorn, apparently coming back to earth, is what I shall be offering as a prize in this lesson. There was silence in which every bubble and gurgle of the surrounding potions seemed magnified tenfold. 1 tiny bottle of Felix Felicis, said Slughorn, taking a minuscule glass bottle with a cork in it. Oh, the fizz, Jesus. There was silence in which every bubble and gurgle of the surrounding potions seemed magnified tenfold. 1 tiny bottle of Felix Felicis, said Slughorn, taking a minuscule glass bottle with a cork in it out of his pocket and showing it to them all. Enough for 12 hours' luck. From dawn till dusk, you will be lucky in everything you attempt. Now I must give you warning that Felix Felicis is a banned substance in organized competitions, sporting events, for instance, examinations or elections. So the winner is to use it on an ordinary day only and watch how that ordinary day becomes extraordinary. So said Slughorn, suddenly brisk. How are you to win my fabulous prize? Well, by turning to page 10 of advanced portion making. We have a little over an hour left to us, which will be time for you to make a decent attempt at the drought of living death. I know it is more complex than anything you have attempted before, and I do not expect a perfect portion from anybody. The person who does best, however, will win the little Felix here. Off you go. There was a scraping as everyone drew their cauldrons toward them, and some loud chunks, clunks, as people began adding weights to their scales. But nobody spoke. The concentration within the room was almost tangible. Harry saw Malfoy riffling feverishly through his copy of advanced portion making. It could not have been clearer that Malfoy really wanted that lucky day. Harry bent swiftly over the tattered books Slughorn had lent him. To his annoyance, he saw that the previous owner had scribbled all over the pages, so that the margins were as black as the printed portions. Bending low to decipher the ingredients, even here, the previous owner had made annotations and crossed things out. Then he hurried off toward the store cupboard to find what he needed. As he dashed back to his cauldron, he saw Malfoy cutting up valerian roots as fast as he could. Everyone kept glancing around at what the rest of the class was doing. This was both an advantage and a disadvantage of potions, that it was hard to keep your work private. Within 10 minutes, the whole place was full of bluish steam. Hermione, of course, seemed to have progressed furthest. Her potion already resembled the smooth black currant-colored liquid mentioned as the ideal halfway stage. Having finished chopping his roots, Harry bent low over his book again. It was really very irritating, having to try and decipher the directions under all the stupid scribbles of the previous owner, who for some reason had taken issue with the order to cut up the Soporius bean and had written in the alternative instruction, crush with flat side of silver dagger, releases juice better than cutting. Sir, I think you knew my grandfather, Abraxas Malfoy. Harry looked up. Slughorn was just passing the slithering table. Yes, said Slughorn without looking at Malfoy. I was sorry to hear he had died, although of course it wasn't unexpected. Dragon poked at his age. And he walked away. Harry bent back over his cauldron, smirking. He could tell that Malfoy had expected to be treated like Harry or Zabini, perhaps even hoped for some preferential treatment of the type he had learned to expect from Snape. It looked as though Malfoy would have to rely on nothing but talent to win the Battle of Felix Felicis. The Soporius bean was proving very difficult to cut up. He returned to Hermione. Can I borrow your silver knife? She nodded impatiently, not taking her eyes off her portion, which was still deep purple, though according to the book ought to be turning a light shade of lilac by now diyeceğim. He crushed his bean with the flat side of the dagger. To his astonishment, it immediately exuded so much juice he was amazed the shriveled bean could have held it all. Hastily scooping it all into the cauldron, he saw, to his surprise, that the portion immediately turned exactly the shade of lilac described by the textbook. His annoyance with the previous owner vanishing on the spot, he now squinted at the next line of instructions. According to the book, he had to stir counterclockwise until the portion turned clear as water. According to the addition the previous owner had made, however, he ought to add a clockwise stir after every 7th counterclockwise stir. Could the old owner be right twice? He stirred counterclockwise, held his breath, and stirred once clockwise. The effect was immediate. The portion turned pale as pink. How are you doing that? Demanded Hermione, who was red-faced and whose hair was growing bushier and bushier in the fumes from her cauldron. Her portion was still resolute purple. Add a clockwise stir. No, the book says counterclockwise, she said. She snapped. He shrugged and continued what he was doing. 7 stirs counterclockwise, 1 clockwise. Pause. 7 stirs counterclockwise, 1 stir clockwise. Across the table, Ron was cursing fluently under his breath. His portion looked like liquid licorice. Harry glanced around. As far as he could see, no one else's portion had turned as pale as his. He felt elated. Something that had certainly never happened before in this dungeon. And time's up, called Slughorn. Stop stirring, please. Bu bölüm çok iyiydi ya. Çok daldım ama gerçi her türlü okuyup geçecektik zaten falan. Çok iyi. Slughorn moved slowly among the tables, peering into cauldrons. He made no command, but occasionally gave the portions a stir or a sniff. At last he reached the table where Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ernie were sitting. He smiled ruefully at the tar-like substance in Ron's cauldron. He passed over Ernie's navy concoction. Hermione's portion he gave an approving nod. Then he saw Harry's. and a look of incredulous light spread over his face. The clear winner cried to the dungeon. Excellent, excellent Harry. Good Lord, it's clear you inherited your mother's talent. Lord'un les küçük lan. Why? Düşünce vakti. I have no idea. Belki de ateist falandır da böyle sırf şey diye, laf diye kullanıyormuştur falan. Heyecanlandıracak zaman falan. I don't know. She was a dab hand at potions, Lily was. Here you are then, here you are. One bottle of Felix Felicis as promised, and you use it well. He slipped a tiny bottle of golden liquid into his inner pocket, feeling an odd combination of delight at the furious looks on the Terrence's faces and guilt at the disappointed expression on Harmony's. Ron looked simply dumbfounded. How did you do that? He whispered to Harry as they left the dungeon. Got lucky, I suppose, said Harry, because Malfoy was within earshot. Once they were securely ensconced at the Gryffindor table for dinner, however, he felt safe enough to tell them. Hermione's face became stonier with every word he uttered. I suppose you think I cheated, he finished, aggravated by her expression. But it wasn't exactly your own work, was it? She said stiffly. You only followed different instructions to ours, said Ron. Could have been a catastrophe, couldn't it? But you took a risk and it paid off, he heaved a sigh. Sagan could have handed me that book, but no, I get the one no one's ever written on. Puked on by the look of page 52, but hang on, said a voice close by Harry's left ear, and he caught a sudden waft of that flowery smell he had picked up in Slughorn's dungeon. He looked around and saw that Ginny had joined them. Hang on, said a voice close by Harry's left ear, and he caught a sudden waft of that flowery smell he had picked up in Slughorn's dungeon. He looked around and saw that Ginny had joined them. Neyse konuşmuyoruz. Olacak zaten. O zaman göreceğimizi. Did I hear right? You've been taking orders from something someone wrote in a book, Harry? She looked alarmed and angry. Harry knew what was on her mind at once. It's nothing, he said, reassuringly, lowering his voice. It's not like, Riddle's diary. It's just an old textbook someone's scribbled on. What you're doing, what it says. I just tried a few of the tips written in the margins. Honestly, Ginny, there is nothing funny. Ginny's got a point, said Harmony, perking up at once. You ought to check that there is nothing odd about it. I mean, all these funny instructions. Who knows? Hey, said Harry indignantly as she pulled his copy of advanced portion making out of his bag and raised her wand. Specialist Revelio, she said, wrapping it smartly on the front cover. Nothing whatsoever happened. The book simply lay there, looking old and dirty and dog-eared. Finished, said Harry irritably, or do you want to wait and see if it does a few backflips? It seems alright, said Hermione, still staring at the book suspiciously. I mean, it really does seem to be just a textbook. Good, then I'll have it back, said Harry, snatching it off the table, but it slipped from his hand and landed open on the floor. Nobody else was looking. Harry bent low to retrieve the book, and as he did so, he saw something scribbled along the bottom of the back cover in the same small, cramped handwriting as the instructions that had won him his bottle of Felix Felicis, now safely hidden inside a pair of socks in his trunk upstairs. Bir dakika. Nobody else was looking. Harry bent low to retrieve the book, and as he did so, he saw something scribbled along the bottom of the back cover in the same small, cramped handwriting as the instructions that had won him his bottle of Felix Felicis, now safely hidden inside a pair of socks in his trunk upstairs. This book is the property of the half-blood prince. Bir şekilde Voldemort'un yazmış olma ihtimali de çok fazla değil mi sizce bu kitabı? Hani Slughorn şeyi görecek aynen. Hani Slughorn'u Voldemort'un şey oldu, hocası olduğunu görecek zamanında falan. Düşünce vakti. Neyse, Voldemort Slughorn teorisine devam edemiyorum. Ama laf şeye geliyor. Harry, Snape sınavdayken 5. kitapta Snape'in anısını baktıydı gizlice falan. O ara böyle Snape'in yazı stilini falan görmemiş miydi oğlum? Tanıması lazım bence. En azından, gerçi tanıması lazım değil ben. Ama ben mesela ablamın yazı stilini falan direkt tanıyorum. Aynen. Bir şekilde belki şüphelenir falan ilerleyen yerlerde. Ben bu yazı stilini de biliyorum falan diye, ama yok. Şüphelenmeyecek. Şüphelenmemesi de gerçi anormal değil. Ben kaç kere gördüm ablamın yazı stilini falan. Bu sadece bir kere bir anıda gördüydü hani. No fucking way'den. Ama Voldemort'tan şüphelenebilir. O da Half-Blood. Onun da dersleri bayağı iyiydi falan. O da böyle şeylerde işte Dumbledore'un gösterdiği anılarda görecek ki işte Tom Riddle'ı bayağı bir takdir ediyor. Bayağı zeki olduğunu Gertrude düşünüyor falan. Kendi dersini iyi yapıyor demek ki. Diyoruz, kendi dersini iyi yapan birisi. Kitabın yazarını da Half-Blood Prince falan. Why not Voldemort falan gibi oluyor, ama tahmin gibi oluyor teoriden çok. Öbür türlü daha demin dediğim şeyi, Harry yazı stilinden hatırlayabilmesi, çözmesi falan bayağı düşük bir ihtimal. Durum bu. Chapter 10. The House of Gaunt. Ha, ilk dersin şeyleri falan. Ama bölümler çok iyi gidiyor ha. Güzel güzel bölümler geliyor hep falan gibi. Güzel kitap sonuçta, of course. Diyoruz. Son bir düşünce diyoruz. Kendinize iyi bakın. Görüşürüz.